to Thomas Talks Episode 2. Today I'm going to be talking about Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse and more specifically the flaws I had with its finale. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was really good as a movie and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And in a movie and in a 2019 where animated movies were phenomenal, with Isle of Dogs being good, Incredibles 2 being good, not great in my opinion, but solid, Ralph Breaks the Internet being amazing, and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse being phenomenal and deserving of the Oscar completely, even though I did like Ralph Breaks the Internet of Isle of Dogs a little bit more. It's really impressive that Spider-Verse did what it did, and it really was a phenomenal movie, but that doesn't mean it's free from flaws. And my flaws from this movie, I can sum up into two main points, and I'm just going to be talking about one of them. The first complaint is I had issues with most of the characters. I felt like, with the exception of the original Peter Parker and Miles Morales, every other, and maybe Gwen, every other character had some flaws or some underdevelopment I would have liked to talk about. So I might come into that later. But the second complaint, the one I'll talk about today, is the fact that the third act of this movie, the finale, the fight in the Super Collider, was deeply flawed. And I can break that into two more complaints. The first complaint is pretty minor. There wasn't really a sense of scale. So when you get into the Super Collider, you kind of think you're in this enclosed space, maybe it's 20 stories tall, who knows, right? But then all of a sudden when it starts up, you have these whole skyscrapers flying out, and these spider people are flying phenomenal distances and whatever, and it's a little bit janky, but I don't think that takes you out of the movie, and I don't think it's a serious flaw. I just think it is a flaw, and it's not really worth talking about. But the second fault is the sense of timing in the Super Collider, and the fact that there isn't a sense of timing, right? So there's this concept of when they go into the Super Collider, I think someone says something, the Super Collider is going to explode and take out all of New York or whatever, right? And that's like why Miles is trying to get his family to move away. But there isn't a sense of timing on when that Super Collider is going to explode. And I don't want to say that if a movie doesn't have a sense of timing or doesn't have a urgency to it, it's necessarily bad. For example, Avengers Endgame, its time heist, there wasn't really a time constraint on when that had to happen. There was a time travel constraint or whatever, but it wasn't like urgent. It was this procedural task, and that's fine, but you never, in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, are really worried that the heroes are going to lose because the Super Collider will explode and kill them all. And so, what I mean by this is there's no blinking red timer, there's no bomb on a timer counting down to when everyone dies. And so, to talk about that, let's look at how it would possibly change the fight if there was a timer. And let's get into this. First of all, I want to say that the stakes of this fight are pretty well defined. You have 3 goals the main heroes have to achieve. They have to get the goober to the top of the Super Collider and plug it in to take control. Then, each spider person individually has to return through the Super Collider to their own dimension. And then Miles, or Peter B, has to close down the Collider and destroy it. The threats to them achieving this are Kingpin, Dr. Ox, Scorpion, the guards, General, them dying in a fight, and the Super Collider exploding and killing them all. And the problem with this is, with the Super Collider not having a timer on it, the only threat to them becomes them losing in a fight to Kingpin, Doc Ock, Scorpion, or the guards. And realistically, you're not expecting that to happen. They're not gonna get shot or killed, right? And that's okay. That's fine. You're a superhero movie. The heroes, like, it's like the Jatari or whatever in the original Avengers. You're not worried about them being killed by the Jatari. You're worried about the Jatari getting out of hand, or you're worried about the overall expansion, not necessarily each individual threat the hero is overcoming. So the super collider exploding becomes a thing they don't want to get out of hand. And this is fixed by a timer. Literally just have one of the people in the control room say, the super collider is going to explode in 5 minutes, and run out of the room and have a blinking timer on the screen and have it count down. And then you don't have to change anything else about the scene, but let's go through about how it makes the scene a lot better. First of all, every single delay that happens matters a lot more, right? Like when they triple sucker punch Doc Ock and she still gets back up and is like, they're like, oh, this is gonna take a while. That actually holds weight. And then she's hit by a train and it's brushed off as a gag. You'd feel a lot more cop-outy, and I feel like that's okay because it was a cop-out end, right? Like, you have 3 spider people absolutely kicking her ass, and she's taken out by a gag, not by the skill of the spider people. And they're having a timer would make that feel like a cop-out and have them probably not do that. And I think that'd be positive. That'd be a positive change for the movie. But it would matter it a lot more. And the second thing that adding the urgency to the scene would allow these 3 goals I talked about to be resolved in a much more interesting way than they were. Because as it stands, the first goal of getting the goober to the top and the second goal of each spider person returning through the goober to their own timeline are resolved at the same time. And the reason for that is there's no reason to not have those resolved at the same time. Once the goober's to the top and plugged in, there's not a sense of urgency. Just funnel everyone through. They're not worried about fighting at that point. They'll just get back through, and they can just fall back in from really anywhere in the collider. No problem. But if there is this sense of timing, there is this, oh no, we only have 2.5 minutes left, we only have 2 minutes left, and we just now got the goober to the top, you could say, knock the goober back out, and only have like the 3 Spider-Men that don't matter, Noir, Porker, and Penny Parker get through, and then you have your core 3 fighting a battle that is now strictly turned against them, and now they're on the clock and start getting bigger and bigger, right? I think that would also be a phenomenal idea where it's like, once they get down to that point, maybe they put the goober back in, whatever, but they're fighting, and Peter B specifically, but him and Gwen have to make the call to either get back to their own dimension and live under this time constraint, because they need to each get back individually, and then Miles has to get up and press the destroy collider button. So they have to make the call to either get back and live, but leave Miles and whoever else to die, or stay there and risk running out of time. And I think that would make Peter B, his desire to stay in, more meaningful. And I do want to say that Peter B is my favorite character in this film, and his sorry, and his idea of him having nothing left and wanting to get through the collider, and not wanting to go through the collider because he doesn't have anything left to live for, is good. But I think if you layer that with the fact that he's taken Miles into his protege and really cares for Miles, and he has stuff to live for in this dimension and he has nothing to live for in that dimension, it would make when Miles tells him, you gotta go home, you gotta create your own life again, I think it would make that matter a lot more if Gwen had already gotten through and Miles and Peter B are like, outnumbered and they're on their last leg, and Miles has to they're hiding in one of the buildings that's randomly appearing out of the super collider, and Miles is like, yo, you gotta go home, even if I don't deal with this, you gotta live, and you gotta live your own life, whatever, right? I think that would matter. And so, and then the final part where Miles and Kingpin fight, and it turns to all reds and blacks, and you get the sense that Super Collider's about to fall, and especially when Miles is beaten and battered, it makes that whole scene have a lot more weight and a lot more urgency. And really the core of this, because I've said urgency so many times, the core of this whole fight is the fact that they need to get the spider people home, and they need to shut down the collider, and they baked in the idea that the super collider would explode and destroy everyone, and that's why they're doing it that night. The idea is, if Kingpin opens up the collider, all of New York will blow up. And so you bake in this sense of timer, and then you don't use the timer that you set up for the rest of the movie. And that's just feels lackluster to me. And I get it, the sense of timing in movies is bad. I know Guardians of the Galaxy 2 was a big offender on using a timer poorly, but at the end of the day, all it's going to do is raise the stakes of that scene. And all it allows you to do is have more creative approaches to how the heroes are going to deal with it. Because now they don't have a threat that's just whether or not they will physically be beaten by the bad guy in front of them. They have a threat that the bad guys don't have to kill them to succeed at their end goal. And this one was maybe a little bit more rambly than the last one. I have a lot of thoughts about this movie, and not a great way to really organize them. I've tried doing this outline 8 times, and I'm really sorry. But that's my thoughts on Spider-Verse Flawed finale. Now, of course, as always, if you have anything else you want me to talk about, if you want me to talk about the Spider-Verse characters, because I can do that. That'd be fun. If you want to come on and we have a voice call and we talk about some of this stuff, all that, super open. Please let me know. Please let me know what you think of this. I'd love to get some feedback, positive or negative. Thank you so much, and y'all have a great night.